see everybody back out in the Lord's house this morning. Appreciate everybody coming out. Good to be saved this morning. Remember the day when you first saw the light? You ever stop and think about that and think back to the day the Lord brought you under Holy Ghost conviction and saved you? Or to be a place in your life, you may not remember the date, may not remember the year, but there ought to be a place you can go back to where you know God saved you. And I remember it just about like it was yesterday. God saved me, 10-year-old boy. Best thing that ever happened to me is getting saved by God's grace.
Yes, sir.
Hey, we may not have always done what we should, but we're still saved and going to heaven this morning. You know, that's the kind of God we serve. He still loves us. Even as sorry as we are after He saved us, He still loves us. That's the kind of God we serve this morning. Good to be in His house. Got your Bible? Be turning to John chapter number 6. John chapter number 6. Begin reading in verse 1, read down through about verse number 13. John chapter 6. After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a great multitude followed Him because they saw His miracles, which He had done on them that were diseased. And Jesus went up into a mountain, and there He sat with His disciples. And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. When Jesus lifted up His eyes and saw a great company come unto Him, He saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? And thus He said to prove Him, for He Himself knew what He would do. Philip answered Him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. One of His disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto Him, There is a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 fishes. But what are they among so many? And Jesus said, Make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place. So the men sat down in a number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when He had given thanks, He distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of fishes as much as they would. When they were filled, He said unto His disciples, Gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them together, and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. This is a very familiar passage here this morning. One of the miracles that Jesus performed. And this chapter starts out, says, after these things. Now over in chapter 5, you'll find where Jesus had healed the man at the pool of Bethesda. And man, He made the Jews mad after this happened. The Bible talked about they wanted to slay Him, they wanted to kill Him. Hey, they began to question Him how He could do these things, even doing them on the Sabbath. Hey, can you imagine all the things that Jesus went through, going about doing good, teaching, healing people, doing these miracles everywhere He went? And soon as He'd do one, they'd pop up and want to persecute Him every time. You know, that's pretty much the way the devil does us today. You try to do something for God and get in with God real close, you can guarantee one thing: the devil is going to start raging. He's going to start attacking. Hey, you don't see the devil attacking lost people. He attacks the saved because he wants to destroy their testimony. Now, Jesus has done these things, healed this man, then they come into chapter number 6. And you know, as you look through the New Testament, man, there's a lot of miracles that Jesus done. You remember Jesus even gave the disciples power to do some things while He was here. They done some miracles also. And you know, those miracles stopped. Hey, a lot of folks think, well, there's men going around healing and things such as that today. No, those things stopped during this era. Jesus went back to heaven. I still believe God can perform miracles, but we don't see them done like we did back then. Now there was miracles. You'll find miracles of healing. Hey, you'll find anywhere Jesus went, somebody had died, He raised them from the dead. Hey, you're going to find there was miracles of grace, miracles of mercy. But there's something about this miracle here in chapter number 6, because it's mentioned in all 4 Gospels. He done something in this chapter. Hey, the disciples was even doubt it could be done. You know, we get like these disciples a whole lot, and we begin to doubt God. Hey, we serve a big God this morning that can do some big things. Hey, He can take little things and make them into big things this morning if we'll just trust Him. Now this miracle, if you'll study a Bible, it took place on the eastern shores of Galilee. It was directly across from the Mount of Beatitudes, and Jesus has traveled across the Sea to Galilee. And man, there's a multitude that's followed Him. Hey man, everywhere He went, there was a crowd went behind Him everywhere He went. Wanted to join up with Him, wanted to get in on the miracles. Hey, notice what these folks were doing. I mean, everywhere He went, what do you think they were doing? They were listening to Him. Could you imagine listening to some teaching Jesus done? Listen to a message that He preached. Just listen to some of these different proverbs and different things like that He told them, trying to learn them some things. Hey, they were listening everywhere He went, man, and they came to Him to learn also. They were listening and learning every time they got around Him. Man, if you couldn't learn something from Jesus, you can forget it. I mean, we ought to learn every time we open this book. I mean, they were listening to Him, they were learning. And can you imagine, I believe there was some of them probably just came along to look at Him. Man, wouldn't you like to look on Jesus' face? We're going to look up on them nail-scarred hands one day. But there was some of this in this crowd. They were listening, learning, and some were just looking up on Him. But you know, I believe there was some of them there just because they loved Him. I mean, that's the way we ought to be in the house of God. Man, we ought to come to listen about Jesus. We ought to come to listen to the songs that are sung. We ought to come to listen to the prayer requests. But man, when this book is open and we begin to read, we ought to listen. We ought to let it soak into our minds. And I'm afraid a lot of times that's one of our biggest weaknesses. I know it's mine not just listening the way it should. Let my mind wander where it shouldn't be. But man, we ought to listen, and we ought to come to the house of God to learn the way they was. Hey man, you can learn more out of this book and get the best education you'll ever find out of God's Word. Man, we need to learn from this book. We need to look to Jesus. Hey, we've looked everywhere else for all our problems. Man, we've got an election year coming up right now, and I'm not politicking, but man, we need to look to Jesus. Wouldn't it be great to pick up a paper, pull the internet up, or see the news this evening, and one of these that are running for office said they're looking for Jesus. They're looking for Him to take over their campaign. Hey, this crowd don't want nothing to do with Jesus. Man, we need to look, and we need to be like these people and start loving Him again. Hey, nobody's ever loved us like Jesus. You know, the Bible said we love Him because He first loved us. Man, we ought to come to the house of God with love in our heart, love in our mind, love in our soul, love each other. But we ought to come looking to love Him. How many times has Jesus just loved on you a little bit because He can? When you're undeserving, when you're down and out, He just pulls up and loves on you. Man, that's the kind of God we've got this morning. Hey, this was going on in this chapter. It was getting late in the day. The sun was setting. And man, the people was getting hungry. Hey, you better look around this morning. This old world, the sun's a setting. And man, these people hungry for something. Man, we need to be getting hungry. We need to be a wanting and desiring God's Word. The Bible said there was about 5,000 men there. And the other Gospels also tells us besides women and children. And you notice if you read down through this chapter, man, they've got Jesus with them. They've got the God of glory, the Creator, the one that's done and already performed miracles. Man, they've got the God of glory with them. And the disciples begin to doubt that Jesus can feed this multitude. Hey, they forgot that they had a big God with them. Sure, this was going to be a big job. It looked impossible to the disciples. But man, they didn't realize what kind of God they had with them. Man, they didn't realize all he had to do. He knew what these disciples were thinking. The way he talks to them down through this chapter, he already knowed in their minds that they were doubting that he was going to do something, man, to make them believe. Man, you can't catch God off guard. Hey, nothing has ever caught God by surprise. Hey, he knew this was going to come up before it ever did. You know, there's nothing too hard for him this morning. Man, God's not dead this morning. He's not sick. Let me say, he's capable of doing above and beyond anything that we can ask out of him.
Amen.
Man, these disciples, man, had already made their mind up that God can't do this. But man, he's able this morning. Hey, they didn't believe that God could perform this miracle right here. And you know, I'm afraid we get like that a lot of times. Hey, you look at Philip here, man, one of the disciples, one of God's chosen. And he's pretty much saying, what we have is not sufficient. It's not enough to take care of this job. It's too big for us. Hey, he forgot that God's grace was sufficient in everything. And I want to preach a little while this morning on it's sufficient. Man, God's enough. His grace is sufficient for every need. No matter what anybody's going through this morning, no matter how much heartache or hardship you got going on in your life, God is enough and He's sufficient this morning.
Amen.
Man, we need to tell the world that God's enough. Hey, we look for this and that and the other, but God's enough this morning. He can take care of every problem we've got. Hey, you look here in John chapter 6 to begin with. There's a serious lack when you begin to look in this chapter. Hey, there's a serious lack of food. Not enough food to go around. The Bible said there in verse 10 there was about 5,000 men there. And you read in the other Gospels, and the Bible talked about that there was women and children there also. Hey, you get it in your mind this morning and say there was 5,000 men there. What if these men, each one was married? That'd make 10,000 people there. Then what if they had 2 children apiece? They could have possibly been 20,000 people there. Hey, these disciples are looking around. Man, and they're looking, there's a picture of a need right here in John chapter number 6. Hey, man, we need to remember every time we come to the house of God, or every time we claim to be a Christian, man, there's people out there in need. Man, there's people, man, when you come to God's house, you know what these folks were looking for? They was looking for bread. Hey, when you come to God's house, you better bring some bread with you. This chapter, what it's about this morning, this story was about getting the bread to the people that was hungry. And man, bread, I don't know about you, but I like bread about as good as anything. Man, bread is something that'll fill you up. It's something that's filling. Man, you take that gravy this morning and put it out there. I love it. But it's not near as good unless you put the bread in with the biscuit. Hey, a hot dog's not near as good unless you put the bread with it. Man, this bread that Jesus has got this morning, man, we need to come to the house of God and bring that spiritual bread with us. Man, that's what I need to be doing every time I get behind this pulpit, is give you some bread to eat this morning. Give you something that'll fill you up, man, through the week. Man, bread is something, man, you put that big good hot bread. When you get it out of the stove and put that butter on, they ain't nothing no better. Man, we ought to have some hot bread when we come to the house of God. Man, you ought to want that spiritual bread. There was a serious lack right here in chapter 6 of that physical bread they needed to eat. You ever just seen a day and time we've got such a serious lack of bread spiritually? Man, we need to be feeding the people. Man, there's so many men that wants to beat them instead of feeding them anymore. Man, we need to put the bread out there. People's hungry. They come to the house of God looking for something. Their soul's hungry. Man, they need to give them some water when they come in here. It gets awful dry out in this world, man. It's a dark world we're living in. Man, there was a serious lack of food right here in chapter number 6. All these people, I don't know exactly how many, could have been up to 20,000, could have been more. Because it don't say how many women and children was there. But could you imagine these disciples walking around scratching their head? Man, what are we going to do? You can look in verse 5 through 6 when he's talking to Philip. And you can find there's a serious lack of Christian faith there also. Hey, Jesus begins to ask Philip a question. He said, when Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company coming to them, he said, Philip, whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Now notice, there's a serious lack of faith when you get to verse 7. The Bible said Philip answered and said 200 pennies worth of bread is not sufficient for them. Hey, the Lord's giving Philip a test right here. He's giving him a faith test. He's wanting to see where Philip's faith's at. Hey, Philip's not truly leaning on Christ right here to take care of this problem. He's flunked the faith test that God gave him. And you know, I'm afraid a lot of times we get like Philip. Hey man, we've got folks that never miss a service. They pray, they do what they should be doing. But man, the very second the church that needs to do something that takes faith, a lot of times we're usually the first ones that say it can't be done. Hey man, we're like Philip a lot of times. You imagine Philip pulling his calculator out, just imagine in your mind. I know they didn't have them images. Can't you imagine him pulling his calculator out, punching in the figures, trying to figure out how that they're going to feed all these people? He looks at the Lord and says, we've only got, what was it there said with it? Philip answered him and said, 200 penny worth of bread is not sufficient. Hey, when you look at that penny worth, he was kind of saying they only had 200 pennies worth. Now, that penny worth was a day wages back in that day. They made a penny worth a day. And what Philip was talking about, it would take 200 working days to make that much money. And he said it's not enough. Man, I've read after some men before and some commentaries and different things, good men, and they say in this day and time it would probably take up over $20,000 to $25,000, maybe just about enough bread to feed those people. And that's probably a conservative number right there. But you know, our churches, seems like anymore, we got a lot of people that's like Philip. Seems like we get afraid of faith and we get afraid to step out and say, God, just take control. I mean, you think about what's going on here. Anything the Bible said is not of faith is sin. And Philip and these other disciples didn't have the true faith. They didn't realize who was in the midst with them. You know all Philip and these other disciples had their eyes on? They had their eyes on the purse. They had their eyes on the pocketbook instead of their eyes on God. And you know, I'm afraid we get like that a lot of times. We get our eyes on the pocketbook instead of God. Man, you ever stop and thought every problem we have is an opportunity to believe God? It's an opportunity to realize how real He is, how sufficient He is. You know, most of our churches seem like they're spinning their wheels because of lack of faith. Man, we just need to simply believe. That's faith is something you can't see. You've got to believe. Man, we need to just simply have that faith. Now, Andrew in verse 8 and 9, you'll find that Andrew's found a little lad right here. And Andrew said, or down in verse number 9, the Bible said there is a lad here which has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. But what are they among so many? Hey, Philip had done the figures. He looks down and they just got these 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. He's saying this is illogical. We can't do this. He's saying there's not enough here to feed this crowd. But look, this little old lad comes up here. The Bible said he's got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And they tell me those loaves were probably about the size of a wafer. Probably just enough for this little old boy to have a meal. Probably just enough. He may have even been saving some of it maybe to the next day to get by. You may say, well, look what this little old boy is doing. He's got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Maybe probably all he had to him. Probably didn't own anything else. May have been all he had to eat. Probably going to go out and have to work it out to get some more. But look what he's done. He's walked up to God and said, here's all I got. He's walked up to God and said, you use this. Hey, we were to be like that. You may say, well, I ain't got nothing to offer him this morning. What about yourself? That's what he wants us to do, is offer up ourselves. Hey, I don't have much to give him this morning, but look, this little old boy shared. Hey, after everything that Jesus has done for us, it ain't much for him to ask for us just to give ourselves to him. I mean, look what this boy transferred to Christ. These 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he was transforming them to Christ. And Christ is going to transform them into something else. You know, that's why so many people don't change. They won't transfer themselves to Christ so he can transform them. You know, there's a lot of people says they're saved, but it never shows on them. They don't live it. They don't want to do nothing. I mean, through the week, they don't want nothing to do with it, but they want to come and play church on Sunday. Hey, they've never transferred their life to Christ so he can transform them. Hey, if a man, a woman, boy, or girl's life has been transformed, they'll be different. Hey, they'll look different than the world. They'll be clean. They'll be separated. They'll be sanctified in God's presence. Man, this little old boy transferred this to God. And look how this little lad right here, man, this little old lad cared. He didn't have to give, but he did. Probably all he had. You know, me and you miss out on a lot of blessings a lot of times by not just simply giving. Hey, it may not be much, but God sees it. And you know, it seems like a lot of times when we want to give, hey, everybody's got to know about it. You know, these people in heaven are going to have crowns over things they've done that nobody's never known about. Right. Hey, that's the ones that gets a blessing from God. Doing things in silence, taking care of something that nobody knows about. Man, these folks that wants to see it done are a lot like those Pharisees. They get the reward here, but there's nothing going to be nothing there. This little old boy just came up and he cared enough to look at God. You imagine this little old boy, how he was dared right here. He walked up pretty much and said, here it is, Lord, see what you can do with it. And I'm not saying that in a smart way or bragging, but there was some great faith right there. This little boy pretty much walks up to him and says, here it is. Use it. You know, we need to be like that this morning. We need to walk up to God. We need to get in the altar and say, here I am, use me. Hey, old Isaiah seen him over there in the temple, high and lifted up. And he said, here I am, use me. But you know why old Isaiah seen what kind of man he was to begin with? He seen how high and lifted up, and them cherubims, man, just calling out to God, praising. And old Isaiah saw, man, that he was a man that was undone with unclean lips. But man, when he got himself right, God used him. I mean, you think about this little old boy just walked up to God and said, here it is. You know, I believe that little old boy may have had something in the back of his mind. He's able. I believe that little old boy had something in the back of his mind that he's able to do the impossible. Hey, there's a God in heaven that can do the impossible. Right. But it takes faith, like this little boy had 5 loaves and 2 fishes. I mean, that man ought to sound like a whole lot. But man, God was getting ready to transform that into something. You look through the Bible, so many places where he took the little things and done the biggest things with them. Took people that was small, that looked at. I'm not talking about the stature, but he took folks, man, that was small in this world and done great things with them. Hey, Moses was a man that couldn't even really speak well. That's the reason he wanted Aaron to go with him. But man, God used him. I mean, you talk about these disciples. Andrew, Peter, and John, them old roughneck fishermen. Hey man, these were some rough, tough men. Probably didn't take nothing off nobody. But God made them fishers of men. Hey, when we get to the place we can be fishers, God will humble our hearts. And He'll do something with us. This little old boy just walked up to God and said, do it. And you look at the sovereign Lord right here in verse 10. The Bible said, and Jesus said, make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place. So the men sat down, a number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves when He had given thanks. He distributed the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down, and likewise the fishes, as much as they would. Now look what this sovereign God did right here. He knew before the foundation of the world this was going to happen. Hey, God took these loaves. Bible said He gave thanks over it. 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and distributed it. And the Bible said it pretty much in the last part of that verse, said likewise the fishes as much as they would. Hey, they was enough, and they got everything they wanted. Hey, I don't believe there was anybody walked away from there hungry. If they did, it was their fault. Man, I believe they got full. The Bible said this, man, you imagine, said it was a place so much grass, they was probably laying around there to eat so much. Hey, God bless this and give thanks over it. And the disciples began distributing. You imagine them walking around with them baskets. I mean, going by the thousands and it not getting empty. This kept going. Hey, He's the God that does the impossible. Hey, it's like that little old widow woman over there that sustained Elijah. You remember that little old widow woman went out, picked up some sticks? You think about that little old widow woman, man, she was living in an impossible situation. Bible said she was a widow. Hey, her husband had died. She was probably living, probably still mourning, may have been desperate. Don't know how long you've been dead, but the Bible said she went out to pick up some sticks and was going to make the last meal for her and her boy. And here comes Elijah. Man, there was a drought, there was some desperation. Elijah told her, man, you go do what I say. She said, there's just enough meal for me and my boy and we're going to die. He said, make me a little cake and everything will be all right. Elijah made her a cake. She done just what the man of God said to do. Done what God told Elijah. She made him a cake and Elijah ate. Can you imagine that woman standing there, everything going through her mind? Nothing to feed my boy, nothing to feed me, and that meal barrel's empty. And that cruse of oil's out. Can you imagine the next time Elijah smiles at her, and Elijah probably told her, said, go ahead and feed you and your boy? Can't you imagine her opening that meal lid? I believe she had to stick her hand to the bottom of it. I believe when she pulled out, man, there was just enough for her and that boy and Elijah. Turned that oil up, mixed it up, there's just enough. Man, can you imagine? I believe that little old widow woman probably had her spade. Hey, they wasn't known for taking care of anybody or trying to help anybody in their situation. But can't you imagine the next day or that evening her going over there, looking down in that barrel, and them tears begin to roll, and here comes another handful. Turns that oil up, and here it keeps going. Hey, we got a God that can do the impossible. I don't believe that meal barrel ever got full. I just believe there was always enough there to sustain it. Hey, man, He's sufficient this morning. Hey, you think about how sufficient He is. God's had a plan before the foundation of the world to come into this world. Man, He had a plan to come and go to Calvary, be resurrected, and ascend back to heaven. And the best part of it, He's coming again. And man, He's going to be sufficient in His return. Hey, this world's going to know who King Jesus is. Amen. Hey, this world's going to know who's top dog when He comes back. Hey, man, His plan was always the blood. Hey, He's the sovereign one and He's sufficient. Hey, His grace is sufficient. His mercy is sufficient. And man, He's got an abundant amount of love this morning sufficient for a lost and dying world. You look in down about verse 13, or verse number 12. Hey, He's fed these folks now. And the Bible said when they were filled, He said unto the disciples, Gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. Hey, there was an excess. There was more left. Hey, I've often wondered, He's a God that's just enough, or a God that's sufficient. But man, He left these 12 baskets right here, which was full. More than they needed. Hey, I've often wondered, man, if He didn't leave them 12 baskets. There's 12 disciples. I wonder if He didn't give each one of them disciples one of them baskets. He said, I want you to remember what I've done this day. Hey, I don't know if He done that, but there was 12 baskets left, 12 of them. He may have given each of them a basket and said, let this strengthen your faith. Hey, how many times has God given you an extra basket? Loaded your wagon when you didn't expect it. Hey man, we got a God that'll load your wagon every now and then when you least expect it, because He's sufficient. Hey, He just does it sometimes because He can. He does it sometimes when we don't deserve it, just because He's God. Hey, that little old boy there just walked up to God and said, use it, do what you can. Hey, He's sufficient this morning. He's all loving. He's a God of grace and mercy. Nobody like Him. Hey, He's still able to take care of me and you this morning. We act like a lot of these things we read in the Bible, that just happened back then, but He's still the God. He's still big enough to take care of me and you and every problem we've got. He's still the God in the mountain, God in the valley. Hey, there ain't no valley, man, too wide that He can't bring us through. Hey, that's what He's here for. He's the intercessor this morning, our mediator. Hey, we talk to Him, and man, He takes our prayers before the Father and pleads our cause. Hey, He's a good God this morning. Hey, I want you to stand to your feet for just a minute. Bow your heads.